Let me introduce Moss from Xero, here to talk to us about a very interesting topic to many of us in the room, going from Xero to OSCP. Big round of applause for Moss.
Hey, for those who don't know me, my name's Moss. You may have actually seen me yesterday. I decided to submit 2 talks to this conference, kind of only expecting to talk about one, but here we are, and so welcome to my second talk. So just a bit about me. I work at Xero. I've been there for about 2 years now. It's been my first job out of uni. It's been kind of a great opportunity to learn and leech a lot of brains off a lot of people, which has been really cool. And I just want to start with a bit of a poll. Could you put your hand up if you're a student or you're kind of looking to get into InfoSec? Cool, a few in the audience. Could you now put your hand up if you work in InfoSec? Sweet, all those students have a quick look, keep your hand up, sorry. And now students have a quick look around, and can you take your hand down if you've done some kind of degree in cybersecurity at a university or a polytech? Cool. And I think you'll see that a lot of hands just came down there. And that's because most people in cybersecurity don't end up coming through a very direct route. A lot of us come through other degrees. Maybe we study something similar. Maybe we don't do a degree at all. It's very much an industry where it's driven by people's passion for security, a lot of curiosity. And it's a lot of these other factors that bring people into it, not necessarily straight through university. So just a bit of an overview. So this talk is mainly meant to be aimed at students and people who are looking to get into the industry or are a bit curious about what goes on. I know before I started my job, I had no idea what goes on at any of these security consultancies or a security department at a even decently sized company. And I guess my passion for security kind of starts when I'm growing up. I like to play video games on the computer. My parents thought I was playing a few too many video games on the computer, so they started to put on some parental controls. I could only play between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. And at one point I figured out that, when you're starting up a computer, you go into the BIOS settings, you can change the time. It was suddenly between 5 and 7 o'clock a lot of the time, and Mum got a little suspicious. She quickly realized that there was something else going on, and this kind of back and forth between me and my parents went on for a couple years. I remember me and my brothers setting up an elaborate plan to record Mum entering her password into the computer at least like 5 times. I think we got it once, so we were pretty happy with that. They reached a point where Mum would take the router. She's leaving for the day, she doesn't want us on the computer, router's gone. We went a bit of searching, found some old cupboards, and there was a router in there from about 5 years ago that luckily we could plug in and worked. So I think that brought us about another 3 months of time on the internet without her knowing. And that kind of, that's where my interest in security kind of starts. And to any parents in the audience, I say good luck. I think any parents in this audience, your kids are going to have a bit more trouble than I did. But when we have kids bypassing lock screens these days just by mushing buttons and finding seg faults, it's still not beyond the possibilities for the kids. So it's going to be a bit of a battle. And this kind of brings me to university. I got UE, I did all right in maths and physics in high school. I decided that I was going to do engineering because that's what you kind of did if you're right at maths and physics. And at engineering, you have a first year where they kind of throw a bit of everything at you and you kind of figure out what you like. I took a programming course. It kind of clicked with a lot of the ways you could break down a problem logically and that fast feedback loop. And a lot of the other courses, it's kind of like, oh yeah, you answer a problem, send it off, and then maybe you find out a week later. So that was really cool, and so I did a computer engineering degree. I got through it, I got to the end, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, now I gotta get a job. You know, I got this piece of paper, waving it around. You start applying for any grad program you can see. You know, you get a CV, you get a CV. Anyone who will take a CV got one. So I saw this company, Xero, and at the time I kind of thought, they make accounting software, not really interested in accounting. It's a web app. I hadn't done a lot of web apps, didn't quite feel like a good fit for me, but I was fresh out of university and I wanted a job, so they got a CV. And I remember rocking up to the interview. I think they told me a couple days before I was interviewing for a security grad role. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but I remember just kind of cram as much of the OWASP top 10 in my head, because I was like, oh, this is all security knowledge that they might ask me about. And so in the interview as well, I remember getting asked, oh yeah, so what do you know about Xero? Kind of repeated the same thing about software, accounting, and being a startup. And I think at the time there were about 2,500 employees. So I got a nice laugh out of the interviewers, and they quickly told me that I was a little off on that one. And so yeah, I got a job. In fact, yeah, I got one job offer and I took it. Believe it or not. I think one thing I wanted to add on interviewing as well is to remember that in an interview, you're interviewing the company as much as you're getting interviewed. I know as someone fresh out of uni, it's hard to remember that because you're pretty new to this whole interviewing process and you are just trying to convince someone that, you know, you need me, whereas really you need to figure out if you need them as well, in a sense of if you find a company and you work for someone who you don't enjoy working for, then you're kind of going to run into a lot of problems down the line where you might end up a little unhappy. Cool. So Xero was really cool. I highly recommend grad programs. If you work at a company that doesn't have one, please get one. I think people gain a lot out of them. For Xero's grad program, I got to move around all our different security teams. I got to try a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And even people who came in from outside the security teams got to try working on one of them. And it was a great chance for them to get some exposure to security as a developer. And it was flexible enough that some people who were hired as security graduates went off to work in mobile teams, and people who were hired in infrastructure roles came and joined the security teams. So that was a really cool experience, and a real way to finally be in a place where to try things that I wanted to try. You know, up until now, I'd done a degree because I was all right at maths and physics. I got a job because they offered me one. It's nice to be able to try things on your own terms and have a bit of flexibility for once. What do we got next? Oh, yeah, security. I definitely felt like before these teams that, you know, it was a bunch of hackers and hoodies trying to start World War III. And to be honest, I've been reading Sandworm recently, and with some of the stuff that Russian APTs are doing, it doesn't feel far from it. It's a scary world out there, and everyone in here is doing some great work to try prevent that. So really, cybersecurity is all these things. It's a lot of stuff. There's probably even more on here. This is just a nice little graph I found online. And when it comes to pen testing and hacking, it's only really this little section here. There's all this stuff going on that makes up security at an organization and the industry that goes way beyond what any of us even think about at uni. And to give you a bit of an idea, we kind of split it up into these different areas for different teams. And some of the stuff that isn't highlighted is just because it's owned by people outside of the security teams or a collective of some sort. Yeah, so security is a lot more than just hackers and hoodies. So this brings us to OSCP. For those of you who don't know what it is, it stands for Offensive Security Certified Professional. it's kind of a baseline certification that shows that you know how to find exploits on a machine, use them, and write a nice report. Well, you don't necessarily know how to write a nice report about it. I was kind of hoping I was going to be done with reports after uni. How naive I was. Reports never leave. They keep coming. Even if you want to be the most, I don't know, the best pen tester, I think you still have to write reports. I don't know. So why is it so valuable? One of my colleagues had this nice little quote. If you want to be a pen tester, the OSCP is worth more than a degree. And I think it's a general sentiment I've picked up on other people I've talked to about it. And that's mainly because of this baseline and that no degrees are actually teaching a lot of these hands-on practical skills that you pick up and learn during the certification. And I think, especially as a student, one thing to recognize is that this costs 1,500 New Zealand dollars. As a student fresh out of uni, I didn't have $1,500 sitting in my pocket, because that's like 2,000 noodles. And man, noodles or an OSCP, you know, I can't eat my OSCP. And I think it's important as a student to recognize that while you might not be able to get this certification because you can't afford it, you can show a lot of those skills that people acquire in the certification, like doing some Hack the Box boxes or some Vuln Hub boxes and doing write-ups. Like I was saying about reports, write-ups are and reports are a pretty essential skill to be able to condense an idea down and to communicate it to other people. If we couldn't do that as an industry, we would be telling people, oh, hey, your stuff got hacked, and they'd be like, okay, why is that important? We need to be able to convey these ideas around the relevance to people, why they should care about these things. And that's where these write-ups become important, because they tell you what happened and how to fix it. So where to start? They give you a nice big pack. I think it's like a 2,000-3,000 page PDF. Oh, probably not that big, but it felt like it. And you get a bit of lab time. I got a couple Twitter handles that I followed and I found really useful in terms of these. Rana Khalil has some great write-ups around the OSCP and provides some great tips on things to learn and what she found useful when she was going through it. Tiberius has a great Previs course for learning that part, because it's one thing to learn how to use an exploit and get on the machine, and then the Previs is a whole other part, which was pretty foreign to me at the time. IPsec does some great videos on Hack the Box. He provides some great resources and was a great resource way to learn, or if I got stuck and I was learning on a box, I'd often default to those videos to learn a little bit more. And TJ now works at AppSec and provides this cool list of Hack the Box VMs. It's kind of a list to work through, and there's a lot of parallels between the boxes on this list and the boxes in the OSCP lab environment. I found them pretty useful when I needed a bit of direction or outside of the lab time, because you get a bit of lab time, but it's never really enough, to be honest. Cool, and this is just an IPsec website. It's called IPsec.rocks. I found it really useful if there was a bit of technology I didn't know about and I wanted to learn something. And it basically points you exactly to a video where IPsec starts working through some stuff, or if I maybe had some technology I wanted to learn about and work on, I could find a Hack the Box box where I could learn about that and get a bit of practice. Here are some great tools I used. I don't know if you've heard of this elite hacker tool called Google. Anytime there was some technology I didn't know about, I was like, GraphQL, Hack the Box, or GraphQL OSCP, and there's usually someone with a great great write-up, a great blog post about how to use that technology in a slightly malicious way. GitHub as well. I didn't realize how many exploits were on GitHub till I started looking. You know, you kind of think growing up that they'd be off in the dark net, the dark web somewhere. No, it's all on GitHub. Yeah, a few other things. The rest are tools that you'll probably come across on your journey and you'll find a lot of use out of. So this was kind of my journey to OSCP. It started in April last year, the start of lockdown. I convinced work to pay for it. And then we were going into lockdown, so I'm like, oh, the timing's perfect. I've got all this free time suddenly. I'm just going to work on this. I think I got 30 days of lab access. So they give you the course content and the exam lab access at the same time. And so trying to get through all of the course content in 30 days in itself is a big mission, especially if you're working full time. I think I got about 15 days in. I was maybe halfway through the course content. I was probably just about to get onto Windows stuff. And I'm like, oh man, I just need to change up. I'm a very practical learner, so just watching videos and reading articles wasn't really helping me learn as much as I'd hoped. And so I wanted a bit more hands-on. And I think I had about a week in the lab and I was burnt out. Especially coming into lockdown, where we have all this free time and the way we work changed. Work finished at 5 o'clock. I'd close Slack and fire up a VM and start working on my OSCP. And that was the better part of 3 weeks. And by the end of it, I was like, man, I'm not enjoying this anymore. This isn't fun. And that was a bit of a shock. And I think after that, I took a bit of a break and stepped back, because I think also with lockdown and coming into this, it was something I hadn't really adjusted to yet, because we all had to develop new habits and new ways of working and living that we weren't familiar with. And I kind of delayed that by deep diving into this. I revisited in September. You have 120 days after your lab access ends to book your exam. I was not ready to sit my exam in September, so I brought some more lab time. I reapproached a lot of stuff. In that time, I'd learned a lot more about Windows. That was definitely a bit of a weak point for me. Linux stuff I've been kind of familiar with, but Windows for me before this was a platform for playing video games on. Like there wasn't, I didn't know much about PowerShell or any ways to Previsk on it, or what Microsoft or Windows ISS is. It's been a bit of learning. Got some more lab time. I think by the end of the lab, I was sitting at about 38 boxes compromised on the lab environment. To give you a bit of context, here's a graph that AppSec put out with their refresh for the 2020 content. So I knew sitting with 38 boxes, I was kind of sitting in that 50% mark. And so leading into it, I was still a little unsure. I think I practiced a bit more. My lab time had run out months ago by the time it came to sitting this exam in December. And I'd scheduled it. December rolled around, I was like, oh, not really ready yet. So I put it off for another month. I knew that before that, the 15th of Jan, I'd have a week off. And I basically was just like, this is going to be my last push, my final push. There's this buffer overflow problem in the exam, which really, I think, intimidated me, because buffer overflow was something I wasn't familiar with, and I guess a class of vulnerability that isn't web related, and I've been doing a lot of web stuff. But in fact, it's probably the easiest part of the exam. I found a course online. You kind of work through it in a day, and it's an easy 25% of the exam, because it's the one part of the exam that one thing you know will be in the exam from all the course content. So in that week, I learned buffer overflow and worked through a few more hack the box boxes just to kind of build some confidence and make sure I was still doing all the right things. I hadn't kind of forgotten anything. So when it comes to the exam, I'm sure some of you have heard it's a 24-hour exam. 24 hours is a marathon, not a sprint. In fact, you could walk a marathon in 7 hours, so it's about 3 marathons. It's something which you just need to take your time with, because there's a lot to get through, and you're going to run out of ideas before you run out of time. It's something you need to take breaks with. It's very easy to just feel like you have to keep trying and you're running out of time, and it's one of the few times I've realized that taking breaks regularly and often actually makes a world of difference. You know, getting up to go grab some food, go for a quick walk around the block. I'd often come up with new ideas or a new way to approach something, and OSCP has this whole idea of try harder. Try harder sounds really weird, because to me, when I hear try harder, it means you're not putting enough effort in, you're not doing enough work on it at the moment. When I found try harder to kind of mean that you needed to take a break, put down what you're doing, especially if you've been trying to do something for 2 hours and you're getting nowhere. Write some notes, remember where you are, come back to it later, and in the meantime, try something else. Cool. So my approach to the exam, I ran my enumeration, had a bunch of scans running on the boxes, did the buffer overflow. I chose to start my exam at midday. Different people have different times they like to start it. I felt like at midday I'd have the morning to prepare myself, the afternoon to do as much as I could. Come sleeping, I'd have all of tomorrow morning to try figure out a few more things, maybe finish up some documentation, see how it goes. So ran the enumeration, did the buffer overflow, came back and looked at what I found, and kind of kept searching through that. I think a big thing as well is run your enumeration more than once. I know I ran a second scan on most of the boxes, and services came up that didn't pop up on the first time, and some of those would have pretty easily been the difference between passing and failing. You get one use of Metasploit in the exam. When I was sitting the exam, I found a service that I was pretty sure was Metasploitable. I kind of tried to use an exploit off GitHub, but I ended up using Metasploit on it just because I felt like I would have been wasting too much time otherwise, and I knew it was some easy points that I could kind of just put in the bank and then start worrying about other stuff. So my recommendation around Metasploit is to use it when you see it and not to fret and get 2 hours into trying to do something without Metasploit and then decide to use it. Cool. Just 2 last things really. One is to take good notes. The notes are really what make or break your exam report. You can get bonus points just by having a good exam report. People on Reddit, so take this with a grain of salt, have said they've gotten up to 10 extra points just by having a good OSCP report. It's also, if you don't document things certain ways, then you can lose points for certain things. Actually, there's one thing I forgot to mention is that when I was sitting the exam, I think it hit about 9 o'clock, and I was pretty sure I had 70 points. So 70 points was a pass, and so at that point I was in a place where it was like, okay, maybe I need to do some more. I wasn't too sure, but I was confident enough I could probably go to sleep and wake up the next day and have more or less the points I needed to pass. And so coming back to the report, make sure you document things well and include things that aren't necessarily like that you got RCE on the box or you got admin privileges. There was one of the boxes on there that I didn't get RCE on at all, and I think I found some user enumeration, but I made sure to put that in the report because in a real pen test report, you put that on there anyway. So there's you lose nothing by putting extra information on the report. It's hard to tell how it's marked at all. I know it was a nervous couple days waiting to hear back, but make sure you basically include everything because, well, as much as you can. And there's some great templates out there. OffSec provides one. Some people have reworked it and put it in Markdown. I know I preferred that a lot over working with wrestling with Microsoft Word. And I think a big one is don't fret failing. The average person passes their OSCP on the 3rd attempt. Failing is a big part of life. If we don't fail, I feel like we grow most when we fail. You know, we learn why things went wrong and how they went wrong, and we grow from that, and we learn, and we try not to do that again. Or we figure out what we don't know. I think it's a big one for the OSCP. And I guess just a bit of that was a nice diagram of me sitting the exam. So just to recap, everyone has different ways and different stories they've gotten here. Very few people have gotten into this industry through a degree. That's not to say you can't. I'm just saying that, in fact, there aren't a lot of degrees you can take, and that a passion for security goes a long way. And I think something I just wanted to add is that this is just one story of many in this audience. I'm sure you've all got interesting stories about how you've got into this industry and how you've come to where you are. And I've loved hearing some of the stories this week, or over the last 2 days, about different ways people have gotten into it. So I'd really love to hear more of them. I encourage you to come back next year and to share your own stories. That's it. Cheers.
All right, thank you very much, Moss. Do we have any online questions? Just checking here. Do we have any questions in the audience? Yes, we do. All the way up there. Hold on. Stay there. Oh, you could, but it wouldn't be on the recording, and then I'd have to repeat it, and then it's just one more work for me, so here you go.
You mentioned with the, you went enumerated over the machines again and something popped up.
Yeah.
Maybe when you did it the second time. Was that running the exact same scan? I'm assuming you're using Nmap, or did you change like a flag and this flag second time it popped up or something?
Yeah, it was the exact same scan. I think there was a stage where I started using some other tools that I wasn't familiar with that didn't really show anything. So yeah, it was the exact same scan, and I was a little confused by it as well. And I'm not sure if that's just because some services took a little longer to turn on and warm up. And I think something I forgot to mention is when you're working through your enumeration, start with the obscure ports. If you get any obscure ports and show up in your enumeration, those are usually going to be the bit more interesting ones, or the easier ones to rule out. Because when you get to your web and SMB and the rest of it, there's going to be a bit more to work through and a bit more going on there that before you will eventually reach RCE.
Does that answer your question? Awesome. Question.
Yeah.
How hard was the note-taking to figure out?
In terms of writing notes?
The process to write the notes and to actually get the report done.
You've got 24 hours after the exam to write the report. I spent the better part of that doing it. I actually sat the exam on my first Monday back at work, so I was like, hey, I'm back, boss, but I'll see you on Wednesday because I'm sitting this exam. For me, writing the report and taking notes is very much just kind of copy-pasting commands. So I'll often either write a command on my notes or I'll copy-paste it into my notes so I know exactly what I wrote and I need to redo it next time. Is that kind of...
That makes sense.
All right.
That makes sense, absolutely. No, sorry for the hard question.
It's all right.
Any other questions we have in the audience at the moment? Yes? Closer this time, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'd just like to find out, coming from a Windows background, how much Linux knowledge do I need to have to do the OSCP?
I feel like it's a hard one to... okay. From my perspective, learning the other way around, I had to learn on Windows how to spawn a reverse shell. probably a bit of bash, it'd be pretty handy. And then the biggest difference is the privilege escalation, because there's a law, there's some similarities between the two, but the way you find those and you look, and the way you exploit them are very different. So I can't tell you how much, but that's kind of the differences.
Yep. More questions? We'll probably take one more after this if there's any.
Absolutely loving hearing the journey. It's just like, oh, memories. One quick question though. What if there was anything that you could say to the industry that would actually possibly help make your journey easier? Was there anything that was difficult that you would love to see us in, I guess, IT in general in New Zealand, or even just InfoSec, that would have helped your journey come along easier or faster?
I think, yeah, it's definitely a hard one to answer. From terms of my journey, I guess it's a lot of stuff that just wasn't even covered at a paper at uni, right? Or there was a paper at uni, but it was very kind of hand-holding you through running an exploit and stuff where, same paper, I think it would have been a lot nicer to have it in a scenario where it's a couple hack the box boxes and you're like, okay, I know these, I think the way of teaching it would have to be very different, and we'd need kind of courses around that. I know there are courses, cybersecurity degrees now, and I think it's also important to remember that penetration testing is only a small part of cybersecurity, so expecting, everyone to learn all that, no worries.
Awesome. Any more questions from the audience? Thank you. Just kidding. Awesome. Can we have one big round of applause for Moss? Thank you so much for joining us.
Cheers.